Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm chatting with Edwin Narain, who is also working on voter registration, and I'll let you know in what capacity. Edwin is a former USF student body president, and he, along with his friend Camilla Oliphant, became the first African-American president and vice president at USF. He is a resident and works at a major wireless communications company, but he volunteers his time working with young people at the Temple Terrace Recreational Center. In that respect, Edwin is speaking to the young vote, and I know that is probably the area that we need to concentrate most on. Edwin, I look at the screens these days, and you see people that you never thought would be actively involved politically, people like P. Diddy and a lot of the, the voices of the younger people trying to encourage them to exercise this right to vote, as we've been discussing. That says to me that it's an important vote, a vote that probably has been not as strong as it should have been in the past. And of course, you are here to underscore that. Tell me why it's important to you to become actively involved with young people and voting.
Well, I think that young people are the future. As you can see in the last election, a lot of Floridians especially are angered by the fact that so many votes were thrown away and that the margin of victory was so small. As you mentioned before, young people have an opportunity to make a difference. Folks like P. Diddy, Russell Simmons, all the people that are prominently out there in the hip-hop community especially, they have the ear of young people, and they've taken their money. They've come out with clothing lines. Some people have even come out with alcohol for young adults to purchase, and they've done very well. If you look at a lot of major corporations, youth marketing is the key right now. Everything from prepaid cell phones down to clothing. So that says there's an economic power there. That means there's also a voting power there. And I think that's why we see these celebrities coming out encouraging young people to vote.
Right. And getting back to my vote doesn't count, maybe a lot of these young people can't identify or relate to the politicians because they don't understand their platforms, or they're thinking that their votes don't count. But we know that many elections have been won with as little as 100 votes that have swayed the decision. Absolutely. So we're saying that every vote counts, and maybe in the course of education you are probably identifying the areas that maybe the younger person can, be more astute to what is going on.
Well, if you look at past presidential elections, for example, President Kennedy, when he beat future President Nixon back in the day, he won by over 100,000 votes. And when you look at the population of the United States, that's not a lot of votes. This last presidential election in particular, I think the total number was 547 votes that the election was finally decided by. Now, some people may say 547. We've got a population of close to 300 million people in the United States. 537 people decided who the next president of the United States was going to be. To young people, we're saying, well, what's 537? Well, $537 would be nice at any time in your pocket. Sure. But a Boeing 747, for example, that holds 490 people at one time in one plane. So we could say maybe 2 747s in the air decided the election. Or a better example here in Tampa Bay, you have Ybor City. Some of the larger clubs in Ybor City hold up to 1,000 people. So a half-full nightclub in Ybor could have decided the last presidential election. So every single vote does count.
Right. And we are strictly bipartisan here. We are not speaking to any party or favoring another. We are just saying it is your right to vote. Absolutely. And exercise it. Now, a lot of the concerns of young people is that, they really cannot decide. We talked earlier about, for example, schools and education and transportation. A lot of them are sort of just taking care of themselves. They don't have those issues. How do you address that with them?
Well, like we could talk about the presidential politics and say, oh, vote for this one, vote for that one. And a lot of people say, well, that doesn't affect my day-to-day life. But as the people that you had on earlier mentioned, your county commissioners, your city councilmen, those folks, they make the difference in your day-to-day. A perfect example is we've just had our tax-free week here in the state of Florida. We didn't have that last year. That was up to the state legislature to vote for, and it was something they decided to bring back. Ybor City, when you go down there, they now have cameras. I think that's, about 2 years old now. That was something that the city council voted for and passed, and a lot of young people were angered by that. But if you don't vote, you can't complain.
Right.
So those little day-to-day things, although they may not affect your pocketbook directly at first, at some point in time you will come in across some type of law that was passed by someone locally.
Right, and I think to bring it home to that level on campuses, if you're dissatisfied with, financial aid or anything that has to do with your being there, yes, that is affected by who you put into power. And I think, too, the point was also made, I think the thrust is to get young people to vote for presidential elections, but I think there has to be an awareness of every election every time that happens.
Absolutely. We have a primary here in the state of Florida on August 31st, and young people definitely need to go out and have their voice heard. Some statistics that I pulled out, in the last federal election 4 years ago, only 32% of the voting population between the ages of 18 and 24 actually turned out. So that makes that number of 537 seem even that much more insignificant. If you got 40% of the vote, just another 8%, I mean, it was a landslide victory in the other direction. Now, if you compare that with people that are between the ages of 25 and 44, over 49% of those people turned out. So for some reason right now, young people are not getting out there to vote, but yet we are the largest spending group in America right now. For some reason, all these corporations are targeting us, and year-round, we are always spending money in some capacity.
Right. Well, we have the largest disposable income, so definitely, that could work in our favor. So what then are you doing on a day-to-day basis to change this statistic?
One of the things that I've been doing is going and volunteering on a particular campaign here in the area with one of the candidates that's running for U.S. Senate. I think it's very important that young people find out about the process, and the best way to find out about it is volunteering your time. Even if that's just going out and canvassing a neighborhood and passing out some flyers, or maybe you just decide you want to go and make some phone calls. Whatever it takes, you have to get involved in this process to really understand what's going on and to make an educated decision about the person that you want to vote for. You hear the expression, the lesser of two evils, so much. What I've come to realize is it's not necessarily the lesser of two evils. I mean, there are very few people on the planet that are exactly alike. So you're basically looking for the person that's going to have the views that are most similar to yours.
Right. When I started in this business, I remember I had to ascertain the issues of our communities, and at the time, the priority was campus unrest. I mean, every time you turned around, people were protesting, and I'm not suggesting that. What that said to me was the activity, the awareness, the willingness to participate, the willingness to protest if it doesn't, meet with your satisfaction. And again, I'm not advocating that, but we need to get back to that consciousness and to that awareness of what happens in our communities and in our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we take for granted here in the U.S. Everybody says, well, it's my right to vote, and I'm going to exercise my right not to vote. But people don't understand it's not necessarily a right. It's a privilege. If you look at other countries around the world that don't have free elections, these people are dying for it. And here in the U.S., although it seems very far removed, people have died for the right to vote, specifically with women's suffrage and the civil rights movement of the 60s. I mean, people were being denied, intimidated, their right to go and just cast a vote in a ballot box. And to think that we have the opportunity and the free will to do it and we don't today is very disappointing.
Right. Are there special concessions made for young people? I mean, I know at work you're allowed time to go, to the polls. Are there special concessions made on campuses, or what is being done to facilitate that?
That is something that really hasn't been addressed by our state university system. I don't think we do a very good job of addressing the fact that students may come from Miami or Fort Lauderdale, find themselves in the Tampa Bay area, and now they have to cast an absentee ballot to vote. This is where it becomes more on the individual to take the onus upon themselves to go out there and re-register in the county that they're now living in so they can make sure they're voting in every election that comes about.
Great. Now, how can folks get to you particularly, or are there similar programs in most of the, constituencies with volunteers such as yourself to help with this process?
Well, I won't encourage anybody to come, the direction that I've come specifically, but what I would tell them to do, if they want to volunteer, go out there, research the candidates. Hillsborough County does a very good job with their website. It's www.votehillsborough.org. People can go there, see the candidates that are currently in office and that are going into office, see the actual sample of the ballot, and they can actually go out and decide which one of the candidates they want to actually volunteer for. for.
Great. Because there's a huge population, as you said, you know, it's a migrant population when it comes to the campuses, and certainly I'm sure every opportunity would be made available, you know, for those ballots to be cast. Now, what do you say then to folks who are still saying, I can't relate to, you know, the candidates in terms of they seem so far removed from me? So I just want you to finally give a word of encouragement to those young people and make sure that they go out to vote.
Well, what I would say to those young people is very simple. I always heard it in my household when I complained about not having enough money, or, you know, having to do some rules or things I didn't want to do. And it was always, do you have a job yet? And I didn't have a job, so I couldn't complain. And it's the same thing. If you don't vote, you can't complain. So it's important for every citizen, young, old, specifically young people, to get out there, research the candidates, and then go out and make sure they cast their vote. Their vote is going to count, especially in these local elections, because this is where you have the greatest impact.
Okay, and I also want to say to some of the adults and parents out there that young people usually don't vote because politics are not discussed in their home. They don't see the example of you making this a priority, and I urge you to do so, not only with this upcoming presidential election, but create that sense of awareness and responsibility in your youth to make sure that they understand and appreciate the privilege to vote. But Edwin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and
hopefully as a result of this, we can see a lot more young people at our polls registering and exercising their right to vote. And as you said, it's not really a right. I keep saying that, but it is a privilege. And we hope that they take full advantage of that. So thank you again for joining me on the program, and that's our show for this week. We hope you've enjoyed it. Join me again next week for another edition of Bayview. Goodbye.